right, let's hit the snapshot review. Unit number 14, contracts for the sale of real property, the conveyancing contracts. Let's talk about it. First one was the contract for sale, also known as the purchase and sales agreement. Some of the legal characteristics we learned about was document has to be binding, right? It's a binding contract, bilateral contract, which means minimum of 2 promises for the purchase and sales. It is enforceable. Executory means that it hasn't been fully performed or it has to be fulfilled. All right. Executed means it's been fully fulfilled. Expires upon closing, must be in writing, contains valuable consideration, and identifies the property, be signed by all parties in order to be a valid contract. The contract creation, created by an unqualified acceptance of an offer, gives the buyer equitable title, power to force potential specific performance. Earnest money secures the contract's validity and buyer's equitable interest, varies in the amount. Deposits controlled by a disinterested party who must act according to escrow instructions. Could be a title company, could be an escrow company, could be a real estate brokerage. Purchase contracts typically have contingencies, and you definitely want to know what that phrase is for an exam. Conditions that must be met before a contract is fully enforceable. Classic contingencies include things like mortgage contingencies, inspection contingencies, property sale contingencies, and escape clauses. Upon default of a purchase contract, the buyer may sue for cancellation and damages, or the big one that you see on real estate exams is specific performance. You want to know the vocab phrase here. A seller may claim the deposit as liquidated damages for the seller, or may sue for cancellation, other damages, or specific performance. The sales contract has primary provisions and secondary provisions, parties, consideration, legal description, price and terms, loan approval, earnest money, escrow closings and possession dates, conveyed interest, types of deeds, title evidence, property conditions, warranties, closing costs, damages and destruction, default, broker representation, commissions, and seller representations. These are all the classic things. I don't think you need to know these rot. I don't think you need to have this huge depth of knowledge here. I think you just need to understand fundamentally what some of the main essential pieces are, like we detailed in the chapter, and I think you're fine. Some of the secondary provisions are things like, could there be inspection contingencies, owners association disclosures, if any, surveys, environmental hazards, compliance with laws. Due on sale, we defined what a due on sale clause was in this unit. Seller financing disclosures, any rental property tenant rights, FHA or VA financing conditions, floodplain and flood insurance, condominiums assessments, foreign seller withholdings, tax deferred exchanges, merger of agreements, notices, time is of the essence, fax transmission, survival disputes, and resolutions. That was the purchase contract. Then we go into the option to buy contract. The option or gives the option to an option E. It's a unilateral contract. I bet you if you see an option question, that's a popular one. The seller must perform. The buyer need not perform. If the option is exercised, the option becomes then a bilateral sales contract. And as a matter of fact, as an addendum to the option contract, they usually affix this purchase contract right behind it so that it's a piece of it. Contract requirements must include non-refundable consideration. That was the big thing that I wanted you to memorize, so we highlighted it for the option right. Price and terms of the sale, option period, expiration date, legal description must be in writing to fit the statute of frauds in most states and meet contract validity requirements. In the option, some of the special or the common clause provisions, how to exercise the option, terms of the option, money forfeiture, what happens if I choose not to exercise the option, how option money will be applied to the purchase price. Regarding legal aspects, create equitable interests that are assignable potentially. The document is also recorded. The third and final contract that we talked about in this segment was the contract for deed or the installment contract. The purchase price is paid over time and in installments, which is why they call it an installment contract. The seller retains title, legal title. The buyer takes possession. At the end of the period, the buyer pays the balance of price and gets the legal title. Regarding interests and rights, the seller may encumber or assign interests, remain liable for the underlying mortgage. The buyers may use, possess, profit, must make periodic payments, maintain the property, and purchase at the end of the term. Upon default of an option agreement, installment contract, if the seller defaults, the buyer may sue for cancellation and damages or specific performance, which is a common thread, right, we see in most contracts for real property. The seller's default remedies vary by area, may sue for specific performance or damage, or may need to foreclose. All right, so those were your conveyancing contracts reviews. Those are the three big ones. The biggest one being the purchase and sales agreement, or the purchase contract, or the contract for sale, as some jurisdictions call them. And then we looked at the option contract, and then we looked at the contract for deed, or the installment contract. All right, that was that. Let's take a peek at some of these test questions and look and see what they're going to look and feel like coming up next.